In the shadows of history, there walks a figure, cloaked in black, eyes like glass, a long curved beak instead of a mouth. It moves silently through plague-ridden streets. Children scream, rats scatter, and behind closed doors the sick whisper prayers. We call it a plague doctor. But what was it really? A healer? A scientist? A fraud? Or was it something darker, an omen shaped by fear? In the 17th century, this mask became a symbol of medicine, but its roots go deeper into the darkest chapters of human suffering. It wasn't meant to terrify, it was meant to protect. And yet, today it haunts us more than any monster. This is not just a story about disease. This is a story about the thin veil between science and superstition, about how we tried to fight death when we barely understood life, and how, even centuries later, we still wear masks, not always to hide from germs, but to hide from truth. The Black Death did not begin in Europe. It began far earlier, far away, on the open plains of Central Asia, among marmots, fleas, and wind-blown trade routes that stitched empires together. Historians and microbiologists now believe the bacterium Yersinia pestis originated in the highlands of western China or Kyrgyzstan. Ancient burial sites there, dated to the 1330s, show signs of plague-like mass death. But the real fuel wasn't just the microbe. It was movement. The Mongol Empire, vast, efficient, brutal, united East and West like never before. Their conquests, their caravans, their merchants became unwitting couriers of doom. The Silk Road carried not just spices and silk, but the seeds of extinction. Rats and fleas traveled in grain sacks, in wool, in soldiers' furs. And when the Mongols laid siege to a Crimean port in 1346, they reportedly flung plague-ridden corpses over the walls, perhaps history's first recorded act of biological warfare. What followed was unstoppable. In 1347, 12 Genoese trading ships docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. What they carried was not silk, not spices, but something darker. Sailors, barely alive, with black boils leaking pus and blood. The authorities tried to send the ships away, but it was too late. Within months, the disease spread like wildfire through Pisa, Marseille, Genoa, Florence, and then north, Paris, London, Oslo, Krakow. It traveled faster than understanding. People blamed the wind, the stars, foreigners, even God. Cities emptied, fields lay unplanted, bells tolled without end. And for the first time in history, Europe went quiet. Chroniclers wrote of whole villages turned to ghosts, families abandoned the dying, priests refused last rites, the dead piled up faster than they could be buried. In some cities, half the population vanished in under a year. It was not just a disease, it was the undoing of a civilization. They weren't saints, they weren't scientists, most weren't even real doctors, but they were needed, desperately. As the plague swept across Europe, cities collapsed, not just in body, but in order. So governments made a decision: hire men to do what no one else would. Enter the plague doctors. These were appointed physicians, often underpaid, sometimes untrained, sent into the heart of infection. Their job? Count the dead, record wills, treat symptoms, and stay alive long enough to do it again tomorrow. In Venice, in 1348, contracts were drawn for plague doctors. Some cities offered huge salaries, others threatened punishment if they abandoned their post. They were both tools and sacrifices. And to face the invisible enemy, they were given armor. Not steel, not chainmail, but black waxed robes, crystal goggles, leather gloves, and of course, the mask. Long and bird-like, it was no accident. The beak was filled with herbs, spices, and vinegar-soaked cloth, thought to purify the bad air. They looked like monsters, but they were the only ones walking into hell, while others fled. That bird-like mask has haunted imaginations for centuries. But it wasn't just for fear or spectacle, it was science, or what science looked like in the 1600s. The beak, almost comical today, was a primitive gas mask, stuffed with herbs like lavender, mint, cloves, and even camphor. It was believed to protect the wearer from miasma, the bad air thought to spread the plague. There were no microscopes, no germ theory. People didn't know about bacteria. But they knew smells came with death, and they feared them. The rest of the outfit was just as intentional. The long waxed robes, designed to repel fluids. The gloves, to avoid direct contact. The staff, not just for walking, but for poking bodies without touching them. It was practical and tragic, because the plague didn't care. It seeped through seams, through breath, through rats, through fleas. The doctors were armored, but unarmed, and for many, that mask became their death shroud. You might picture a plague doctor racing from house to house, saving lives, but that was rarely the case. Most plague doctors weren't skilled physicians. In fact, many were young, inexperienced, or even volunteers hired by desperate towns. Their job? Not to cure, but to document. They wrote down names, inspected corpses, counted the dying, witnessed wills, and sometimes they simply watched. In cities like Florence, Venice, and London, they were paid by the state, sometimes given lodging, always given risk. But for the people, they were no longer men, they were omens. The masked bird meant someone inside was already dead. Some tried to help, others charged for treatments that didn't work. Some stole from the dead, some were even blamed for spreading the plague. It was a thin line between healer and harbinger, between doctor and death collector. The plague ended, but the bird remained. Long after Europe buried its dead, the mask took on a life of its own. It appeared in woodcuts, in oil paintings, in shadow plays and carnival parades. A walking memory of humanity's darkest hour. To the survivors, it was a ghost, a mask of death they could never unsee. In Venice, it became part of the carnival, twisted into grotesque beauty. In Gothic novels, it crept into nightmares. In horror films, it stalks us still. Why does it linger? Perhaps because the mask hides more than a face. It hides the line between science and fear, hope and horror, healing and helplessness. The plague doctor was never just a man in a mask. He was a mirror, reflecting everything we feared and everything we failed to control. Look into the eyes of the plague doctor's mask, and you'll find nothing staring back. No face, no emotion, just a cold shell. And yet, we see so much in it. We see our fear of death, our desperate grasp for control in the face of chaos, our belief in ritual over reason, in masks over medicine. The beak held herbs, but maybe it also held hope, a fragile belief that something, anything, might save us. But masks don't just conceal, they reveal. They show how far we'll go to protect ourselves, not just from disease, but from the truth that we're vulnerable, that we're mortal, that sometimes we have no cure. And so the mask lingers in history, in horror, in culture, not because it worked, but because it meant something. A symbol of fear, of survival, of what it means to be human in a world we can never fully control. The plague ended, but the mask never left. Maybe because part of us still needs it.